Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Atheist Viewpoint. I'm Ellen Johnson, the president of American Atheists, and you know my co-host Dennis Horvitz, who's also the host of New York City Atheist Live on Tape. Back with us again this week, we're so happy, is Dr. Massimo Pigliucci. I just like saying the name, Dr. Massimo Pigliucci. Dr. Pigliucci is a professor of ecology and evolution at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. He holds a doctorate in genetics, a doctorate in botany, and a doctorate in philosophy. He has been awarded the Dobzhansky Prize from the Society for the Study of Evolution, and he is a 3-time winner of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory Science Alliance Faculty Research Award. He is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of the Paranormal. He's a widely published author and lecturer. Among his books are Denying Evolution, Phenotypic Integration, Making Sense of Evolution, Tales of the Rational. And Dr. Pigliucci is also interested in the philosophy of science, in particular conceptual and critical analyses of fundamental ideas of evolutionary theory. He is interested in experimenting with new methods of teaching both graduate and undergraduate classes, and is involved in outreach activities that include public lectures and writing. He also has a regular blog on issues ranging from science and philosophy to politics and critical thinking. We'll put the blog URL on at the end of the program. Today we're going to continue talking about his wonderful book, Denying Evolution, Creationism, Scientism, and the Nature of Science. Dr. Pigliucci has debated all of the major creationists. He's debated Duane Gish 5 times. He's been there. He knows that. Let me ask you one question to start. A lot of atheists can't wait to debate a creationist, but it's not that easy. It takes you, and it's not because you don't know science. It's because they're tricky. And you have to know techniques of what to expect. Do you recommend that the average person go into a major debate before an audience with a creationist?
No, this is one of those things that should have a disclaimer like car commercials. Don't do that at home. This is done by a professional driver. And in fact, very often, even the professional drivers don't know how to do it. One of the reasons several scientists don't engage creationists in debate is because they're aware of the fact that these debates are usually not about science at all. Just think of a presidential debate during an election campaign. If you think that presidential debates really are won or lost on the basis of the actual policies that the contenders are presenting, you're fooling yourself. Debates are won or lost on the basis of sound bites, on the basis of rhetorically effective ways of presenting things, and even on your good looks, frankly. If you don't look good, don't go to a debate because that's already a starting point, negative point on your side. Which, of course, brings the question up of, should you debate at all? And I think the answer is yes, if you know what you're doing, if you studied your opponent, if the venue is the right one, that is, if you have a reasonable number of people who might be fence sitters, who might be people who are genuinely interested in hearing about science. Under those conditions, I think debates can be effective. They can reach a certain number of people. Just do not go into it with the idea that the opponent is an idiot, and therefore it's going to be very easy to explain to everybody else why he's an idiot. The opponent may be an idiot or not. That remains to be seen. But he certainly has a lot of experience, very likely has a lot of experience in doing these sort of things, which most scientists don't. Most scientists do not go to talk in the public to begin with. Scientists are very averse. There is no incentive for professional scientists to go and talk to the public. In fact, if anything, usually that person gets criticized by colleagues. There are no points that you get for tenure at universities for talking or writing for the public, which is a whole separate issue. That should change. That ought to change. So I really think that debates can be done, but with extreme caution.
And I think it's also important to point out too that when you debate a creationist or an ID proponent, these people are not accountable to their own target audience for facts, for saying anything verifiable or scientific. They're not held to that standard that scientists hold themselves to.
That's true, except that you can in fact catch them into making factual factually wrong claims, and if that happens, they do lose points with their own audience.
They create a certain cognitive dissonance in their
That's right.
their constituency.
I have to say I can't praise this book enough. I really enjoy reading this book. You can see all these little notes that I have in here. I just love it.
Let me tell you, Ellen, I use that as actually a personal reference, and I'm not just being flattering to Massimo because he's here. It's absolutely true. When I get into debates, I
And you
that.
and I have seen these books, seen a lot of these books.
Tons
so
of them.
I really, really
And,
enjoy this one.
and it's an excellent book in a field of excellent books,
Yes,
actually.
exactly.
yeah.
Let me just read something. Speaking of debates, you say in this book, yet it is amazing how sharing a common ideology makes creationists gloss over their huge differences and focus with a sneer of triumph on truly minor disagreements among evolutionists. This is perhaps one of the most damning pieces of evidence that creationism is not a science. What counts in creationism is only the general idea that a personal God exists in the universe. How creationists arrive at that idea is something they confine to their internal theological squabbles, not to be discussed before the public. One never knows. People might start noticing the inconsistencies. So they can be wildly inconsistent, and no one ever, calls them on that.
That's correct.
But a minor,
Yeah,
point
I've
in
had
evolution.
creationists pointing out to me that scientists disagree on the exact date, for example, of the age of the Earth. Well, is it 3.5 billion or is it 3.8 billion years? And I look at that and I say, well, that's a reasonable disagreement. I mean, we're talking about events that happened a long time ago. It's very difficult to come up with accurate estimates. So on the other hand, creationists have apparently no problem in considering among their ranks people that think that the Earth is 6,000 years old and people who accept the scientific evidence for 3.5 billion years. Now, between 6,000 and 3.5, there are several orders of magnitudes of difference. It is not a minor detail, and yet these people have no problem because, well, as long as you say you're a creationist and God did it, it doesn't matter what the details are.
Listen, these people are so mad for power, they're even willing to temporarily suspend their hatred for Catholics.
That,
I mean, that shows how extreme they are,
There's so many issues to discuss. Another one that I particularly like that you discussed was the idea, creationists talk about design, or the ID people, the intelligent design proponents. And you say here, Darwin himself recognized, this was fascinating to me, Darwin himself recognized this potential problem for the acceptance of his theory, even though his idea was precisely that design can occur in nature without intelligence. Design can occur in nature without intelligence by the undirected force of natural selection. Cunningly, Darwin addressed this objection by focusing on the defects rather than the alleged perfection of living organisms, humans included. In fact, it is amazing what poorly designed organisms we all are. Yes, clearly we all, God could have done a lot better.
absolutely. In fact, Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, once wrote that if he had been a God with infinite amount of power and infinite amount of time, and this is the sort of universe that he came up with, he should be ashamed of himself.
It's pathetic.
It's pretty pathetic. But Darwin was really very smart in making that move, because let's remember that The Origin of Species, Darwin's main book, came out in 1859. And up to that point, creationism, in fact, in the form of intelligent design, was the accepted explanation for the diversity of life and the history of life on Earth. And the major intelligent design book was published by William Paley at the beginning of the 19th century, only a couple of decades before Darwin's book, a few decades before Darwin's book. So Darwin made the extremely smart move of devoting an entire chapter of The Origin of Species to responding directly to Paley, who he saw at the time as his chief intellectual opponent. By the way, that was the last time that intelligent design actually had any intellectual relevance among serious academics. And the way Darwin did it was by taking exactly the sort of examples that Paley was bringing up as examples of design, such as the human eye, how complex and how wonderful the human eye is. And Darwin showed, yes, it is an incredibly complex structure, no question about it, but it's also an incredibly flawed structure. For example, we have things like a blind spot on the side of our eye. There is an entire part of our visual field that we don't see, that our brain literally has